Welcome to Drive Idaho podcast number 4. Hi, my name is Vincent Trimboli. I am the manager for the Idaho Transportation Department's Office of Communication, and it's my pleasure to host these podcasts. The Drive Idaho podcast is a new communication channel for ITD. We release these podcasts on a monthly basis, and for the first year or so, we will use this forum to help better educate the public on the I-84 corridor in Canyon County. Here's what's on tap for this episode. In a moment, we'll have the latest on the Interstate 84 construction zone in Nampa. Then we'll dive into the idea of economic opportunity being created by the interstate expansion from Nampa to Caldwell. Now, so far on this podcast, we have spent a lot of time talking about mobility, and last month we focused on safety, especially safety in the work zones. This month, we'll take a closer look at the topic of economic opportunity and how it relates to roads. Of course, the Idaho Transportation Department's mission is your safety, your mobility, and your economic opportunity. We have 2 guests to address this topic. Clair Bowman, a senior transportation planner for the City of Nampa, and we head out to Nampa to visit on location with John Jurcak from Woodgrain Doors to talk about how transportation affects local businesses. But first, time for a news update. If you've driven on I-84 in Nampa this month, you can see we're well into construction on the Karcher overpass. The overpass is on track and should reopen this fall. The widening of I-84 between Karcher Road and Franklin Boulevard will begin later this summer. We're still a few months from the start of this project, and soon we hope to have an update on exactly when we know the date the work will begin. It's not just construction in Canyon County. Significant efforts are underway to design improvements between Franklin Road and Caldwell and Karcher Road in Nampa. We'll be coming out to the public this summer to share options for I-84 expansion into Caldwell. That includes a new design for the 10th Avenue interchange and many other improvements to interchanges and the highway itself. The expansion of Interstate 84 will have a significant economic impact to the state of Idaho and the Treasure Valley. Did you know that 47% of Idaho's gross domestic product, or GDP, is generated in the Treasure Valley? Also, more than 600 businesses with nearly 40,000 employees in Ada, Canyon, Washington, Payette, Gem, and Owyhee counties are all directly reliant on the interstate. Those facts give you just a little more context as we set up today's discussion about economic opportunity created by the I-84 projects. Here to shed more light on the topic is Senior Transportation Planner for the City of Nampa, Clair Bowman. Clair, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Well, Clair, you have a very long history with transportation in the Treasure Valley. You served for many years as the director of the Treasure Valley's Metropolitan Planning Organization, also known as Compass, and today you're the senior planner for the City of Nampa. Tell us a little bit about what your job entails.
There are a number of items to it, but essentially it's identifying high-priority projects, both safety and congestion projects, that need to be built in the city to maintain or improve current levels of service. Those come out of a master plan from the police often, professional judgment. Citizens often suggest things like that. Once you have some of those high-priority things identified, the next step then is to consider how to fund them. If you identify ones that are both high priority and for which you think there might be funding available, then the city on its own typically initiates studies of them so we can apply for grants and things like that. That's my responsibility to help guide those as well, all the while remaining cognizant of the trade-offs between constructing road projects and impacts to the overall business economic climate of the city.
When you make those choices and you do those studies, the decisions you make, how much are they centered around the local economy?
The local economy always plays a role in those discussions. Every project has a geography that goes with it. Within that geography, we look at all the businesses. What are the likely impacts to those businesses? We go out to meet with them ahead of time. We try to do those meetings 2 or 3 times as we lead up to a project and then provide a forum for those businesses or homeowners also. But a lot of our projects impact businesses.
Well, and a lot of those impacts are obviously the construction impacts of a potential project. But how much do you talk to them about their business and the impact that this will have on their business when the project's finished?
We talk a good deal about that. Especially small business owners are more concerned about the immediacy in my experience.
Right.
Than
their margins, right?
Yeah, their margins are slim, or even if they're not terribly slim, they perceive change as likely to affect that margin.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the discussion up front is helping them understand that we're trying to look at the future out here. We're trying to see how to make the whole system work better in and around their businesses. If we can communicate that message in a way that makes sense, we reduce their short-term fears, and we make the whole project go simpler.
Yeah. So the specific improvements we're talking about right now on the Drive Idaho podcast is the expansion to 84. What kind of benefit do you expect for the local Nampa and Canyon County communities from this set of projects?
I think Nampa experienced its greatest benefit when the widening happened from Ada County out to the Franklin interchange. There is a problem now in that especially the PM peak backs up at Franklin, and it still backs up at Garrity.
Mm-hmm.
So what you get for Nampa when you extend that all the way out to Caldwell at some point is you get a reduced congestion, which makes Nampa business access more enticing to folks than it is today. What you get from Caldwell's perspective is access to the markets in Boise. It's a big deal for the businesses in both cities, I think.
Claire, we see a great deal of freight on the I-84 corridor in Canyon County. Can you explain how these improvements to the interstate will benefit freight and trucking routes and the local economy?
Number one, for a truck to stand in traffic, almost stopped or extremely slow speed on the interstate, has a direct financial cost to the business that wants that truck to get someplace else. Fuel, driver time, if it's a refrigerated truck running the refrigeration unit, all those costs multiply if they're stuck in congested traffic. The second is for their customers or their delivery sites. Congested traffic makes their delivery schedule more unpredictable. And therefore, some of the operators of these big fleet trucks try to schedule their trucks around the congestion times. That's becoming increasingly more difficult to do. We anticipate the improvements to I-84 on out to the west of Caldwell make that a whole lot easier in the Treasure Valley. And most of the freight is Treasure Valley origin and destination. There's a lot of through freight, but there's far more local origin and destination freight.
Well, and if you're late for your first delivery, then you're probably going to be late for your second, third, fourth, and it's a domino effect, and it affects that delivery business's bottom line, right?
Exactly.
Well, Claire, thanks for joining us. We really appreciated working with you and so many years and working with the City of Nampa. You're such a big partner for us and what we do, especially in this project. So thanks for taking the time to come here today and really educate our listeners. You know so much, so it's really a pleasure having you here.
You are most welcome. My pleasure indeed. Thanks.
We take the Drive Idaho podcast show on the road. Our next guest is John Jurcak, Vice President for Woodgrain Doors in Nampa. Woodgrain is a large manufacturer and supplier of interior and exterior wood doors. It's headquartered here in Nampa. They're located right next to the Karcher Overpass, currently under construction. They are right in the path of construction, so to speak. We welcome John to the program. John?
Glad to be part of the communication process.
Tell us a little bit about your business.
Woodgrain Millwork was started in 1954, private ownership, third generation involved in the business now. This facility, we're shipping somewhere between 7,000 and 10,000 doors per week out of just this one domestic location.
A big part of your business isn't just putting doors out, but it's receiving materials, and that's an important piece of the transportation puzzle for you, right?
80% of the materials that we utilize in this operation come from our mills. Okay. We have a mill up in Fruitland that manufactures some of the components. We have a lumber mill in Emmett that actually brings in logs and cuts the lumber. So, transportation from us through our internal network is absolutely critical to what we do here.
How important is transportation in your business?
On average, we're getting somewhere between 6 and 7 trucks a day coming into this operation. It could be a flatbed of lumber coming from our mill in Emmett. It could be a van coming from our facility in Fruitland. It could be a container coming from our operation in South America. So we've got a structure of transportation that is variable. They all have to come into this property, and this property is not optimally laid out. We're constrained by 2 railroad crossings and a bridge getting us back over to the main thoroughfare. So from our perspective, easy access, safe access for our supply partners is absolutely critical to us.
Talk about the public input process when it comes to these transportation projects? I know up front you had some input for the Idaho Transportation Department. Hopefully we've incorporated a lot of your feedback. Talk about that process and how important that is from a business standpoint.
Well, I'm appreciative of the process because we were allowed to provide input. The bridge that's currently being demolished or has been demolished and being rebuilt, that impacts our business, our people, our suppliers for roughly 8 months. Going into that process, first thing I wanted to make sure is that in our property, if we're limited by the access of the trains, we need to make sure that we had the first responders to have access in case something, God forbid, were to happen in our facility. So in working through this process, we sat down with IDT, the city, everyone else, and said, these are our concerns for our people. How are we going to address it? And, at the end of the day, we have to move forward. As we were going through the process, our supply partners, our truckers that are having to navigate down the boulevard now, navigate those tight turns and get more involved with more traffic than they're accustomed to, we walked them through exactly what was going to take place. So our concern was at least our supply partners getting in and getting out of here safely was a big concern. So it was broader than just our people. We just need to make sure that we're taking care of our employees and keeping them safe on a regular basis. And from our perspective and from Woodgrain's perspective, everyone involved in the process has been very accommodating.
John, thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Glad to be part of the process. Thank you.
Time now to take questions from the community. This month, I not only get to ask the questions, but I get to provide the answers too. Our first question, can I still get a ticket in the work zone if no one is working? Well, the answer is yes, because the work zone is in place. You can get a ticket whether workers are present or not. Work zones are set up to provide a safe construction area, so when you see orange barrels, always slow down and stay engaged. Fines do double as well in a work zone. The second question is, how soon will construction affect my commute? And the answer there is later this summer once we begin the widening project between Karcher and Franklin in Nampa. The exact date hasn't been announced yet as they're still working on final plans for that construction, but the short answer is probably later this summer. Time now for our monthly safety message. And for that, we head into the factory where it's a little noisy, so bear with us on this one. And it'll be John Jurcak from Woodgrain Doors who will have this month's safety tip.
Every accident is absolutely preventable. There's steps that you can take as an individual to not put yourself in a dangerous situation. We always want to keep our employees out of harm's way, whether it's with equipment or forklifts or anything like that. Make sure you're using proper lifting techniques and see around you. We call it ABBY, above, below, behind, and in front of you. So you've got to be looking around your situation to make sure that you're not putting yourself physically in harm's way. Most of the instances that we've had, injuries that have occurred, were because of lapse in judgment. It wasn't the equipment that was doing something wrong, it was the employee that was doing something wrong. So we try to keep in front of our employees saying, don't let your mind wander for a second, because it only takes a split second for someone to have an injury that can impact their life and their families forever.
That's going to do it for our 4th edition of the Drive Idaho podcast. To learn more about the Idaho Transportation Department, please visit us anytime from anywhere at itd.idaho.gov. Also, join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For the latest on road conditions, know before you go by checking 511.idaho.gov. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Vincent Trimboli. Please be engaged behind the wheel and drive well, Idaho. 2 hands on the wheel, eyes on the road, and your mind on driving.